Welcome to Soul Care, to a pause in your week, perhaps at the beginning of the day, a moment to reflect and to have some thoughts that go with you into the next few hours. We're living in a time of the emotions of the post-election days, aren't we? We're still watching on the news and thinking about the tension that we experienced last week until Saturday when the news was revealed that Joe Biden had been elected. And still there's tension that follows that announcement. I don't know about you, many people felt a tremendous sense of relief, and some felt a sense of true jubilation. I don't feel ready to dance in the street though, because I'm worried about our country. Nearly 7 million more people voted for Donald Trump this election than last time. And it was a close call. And I just worry about the country. I truly worry about our country going forward. There will be change, and I'm hopeful. But the tension between the poles, left and right, will pervade. And I wonder what that means for us as people of faith. What does it mean to admit that we have such divisions and problems in our country and we're a part of it? I'm reminded of another politically tense time in our history when President Lincoln gave his second inaugural address. The speech ends with these beautiful words: "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." These words are enshrined inside the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. I went to college in D.C., and it was a favorite place of mine to walk along the reflecting pool and then to sit inside the memorial and look up at the statue of Abraham Lincoln. With malice toward none. I wonder if we can live now in the coming months with malice toward none. We're moving into a new administration, but we are going to experience a divided Congress and truly a divided country. The campaign signs have mostly come down in my neighborhood, but many of us still stand behind an invisible sign of self-righteousness. We are so sure of ourselves. Jeremiah was a prophet, one of my favorites. He's been called the prophet of doom, but really he's a prophet of hope. He cared deeply about the welfare of society. The landscape of life was very bleak in the days of Jeremiah. For 28 chapters in the book of Jeremiah, the prophet predicted doom. He warned of a horrible future. Then the city of Jerusalem fell. It was conquered and destroyed, and the people were dragged off into exile in Babylon. The people there understood their fate to have been determined by their own sin. They had ignored God, and that they had fostered delusional politics and economic policies. And in chapter 29, Jeremiah writes to these people living in exile among the conquerors in a foreign country and gives surprising advice. You would think that maybe he would console the people for being alone and without their homeland, but actually he says, build houses and live in them, take wives and have children. In other words, go on living. And then, quote, seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. I think we find ourselves living in exile in society and as individuals. We may feel alienated by this coronavirus and also by the polarization politically in our nation. We feel somehow ostracized, limited, and depressed. I wonder what it means to seek the welfare of our country at this time. I suppose it means to do what we can to not inflame the emotions of our neighbors with whom we disagree. I suppose it means to stay informed and to work for what could be possibly the welfare of our nation. As people of faith, we need to work to compromise, to come together, to use respectful and kind language with one another, not to attack people who are different from us. Some of us are going to be eating Thanksgiving dinner with family members, if we're lucky, and some of those family members may have different opinions politically. Oftentimes the holidays are a tense time for people when they gather together, and they have to agree not to talk about certain topics like politics. We'll have to be careful. We'll have to use hospitality when engaging with others who disagree with us. Jeremiah writes a letter to the people in exile. He writes the words for God, because that's what a prophet does, speaks the word for God to the ancient Israelites, that they need to keep their faith in God, even in exile, even without the temple, even without the practices of their faith, that they need to live by God's commandments and do whatever they can to make life good. And this is what we need to do. We need to do whatever we can do to make life good, following what we think God would have us do. Perhaps as people of faith, we can exercise some influence even with those in the secular culture around us by being ethical, by being honest, by honoring our neighbors. Perhaps we can work for change in the areas where there's compromise possible. Hopefully our disagreements can be civil and maybe even constructive. The Christian perspective is always to stand up for what we believe God would have us do and say, but we need to think first of the well-being of those around us. We are called to have hope even in a bleak time. We are called to work for a way forward even when the left and the right are a large distance apart and it seems like there's no way to bridge the gap. Walter Brueggemann, an Old Testament scholar, says of this passage in Jeremiah that I'm referring to, we are called to have hope in the future, the same hope that God has for us. God has not abandoned us, and we're not to abandon God. God is ready for us to call on God by living into God's reality, by seeking God with our whole hearts, by practicing justice and loving kindness. We will find God, he says. We are called to live into a community where the well-being of those around us becomes more important to us than ourselves. It's that other orientation that our faith asks us to abide by. It may be the key for us. The Apostle Paul spoke about the fact that we are children of light, children of the day. We're not of the night or of the darkness. Therefore, Paul says, encourage one another and build up each other, as indeed you are doing. So if you are rejoicing in your camp, or if you are grieving in your camp after the election, well, consider what we can all do to seek the welfare of the country. We don't improve relations by tearing them down. We improve them by building them up. May it be that we are children of light and that we offer hope. And may it be well with your soul. And as it is well with your soul, may it be well with the soul of our nation.